Good day, everyone. Today I want to share with you a Python program which I completed a few months ago. Now, what this program does is this command line interface program, which takes some data, performs validation on it, and then it creates email drafts with that data. So let me give you some context and explain the business problem a bit. There is this hedge fund, and they are receiving daily reports from their brokers, and these reports are going to be ingested into their portfolio management system. However, there's often issues with the data, preventing it from being ingested properly, such as invalid data types, or some of the data will be checked against some kind of internal code. And what this program does is it just automates that process of invalidating or validating the data and then creating email drafts for those brokers to report to them their invalid entries. All right, so now I just want to give you a run through the program. So let's execute it here. So I have it installed as a package, so I'm just going to access it that way. But you can see, just going to get a message telling us what it does. And we got our list of commands as well. So like I said, we're going to validate the data. We're going to consolidate the valid entries from all reports into one, and then we're going to email the invalid ones to each broker. So let's take a look at the first command we have here for validating the reports. Take a look at our options. Now it's going to take a file path and it's going to look into that file path for all the broker reports, and then it's going to perform our validations on each of those files. And we can give it a default file path or provide it a custom one. So here we're just going to use the default path. And I'm going to open up my directory here just so we can get an idea of what's going on. Execute it. Get a little message in the terminal telling us for which brokers these validations were performed for. And we can see in our directory now that we have two new folders for the valid entries. And then we're going to have another folder for all the invalid entries. So let's take a look at one of these invalid reports here. So you can see we got these columns starting with valid, and these are just going to be some Boolean columns basically telling us the result of the validation for the respective column. So here's like date, for example, that's a future date, so obviously that's going to be invalid. And you can see the rest of the validation Boolean columns there. So now we're going to go through the consolidation command. Now what this does is it goes through the directory and it looks for the valid reports for that day and it consolidates them all into one file. So we're going to take a look at the options here, and it's the same as the validate report command. This time let's do the custom file path. So you can see here that I'm just going to keep on providing a file path or garbage input until I give it a valid directory. So it's going to continuously prompt us until we give it an actual directory, which I did here. So now it's gone ahead and done the validation. So looking into this directory, now we have a new file which has consolidated all the reports. So one of the things you're going to notice about this data here is that some of the entries are repeating, and that's just because this is test data. So the test data for each broker report actually doesn't have any valid entries. So I've appended to each broker report some invalid entries, and that's why they're all showing up for each different broker report. So the last command that we're going to go over here is the email drafting. And what this is going to do is it's going to go through all the invalidated broker reports for that day, and it's going to send an email draft or create an email draft for each of those reports. So we're going to use the custom path again here. So we can see we get a little terminal output and these Outlook windows pop up, and we have an email draft for each of the brokers that we made a report for with the report attached containing all their invalid entries, and we have a dynamic email body here summarizing what their invalid entries were. Okay, so I already had that open actually, so let me just close this and open this again. So we can see it's that same report we saw attached to the email. So the email body that we're seeing here is just dynamically generated based on the report that's attached. So the last thing we're going to go over is some of the actual code. So just to show a little bit of the structure here, we have it organized as a package, and we have our TOML file so that we can package it. And now we're going to take a look at the main file, which only just shows us initializing our actual CLI, but all the logic is separated into different modules. So here, this is logic we execute when we use one of those options in our CLI. Here, for example, is our validate reports. We're just getting the file path. We're making sure that what we were given were files. Then we're going to pass that to some separate functions in different modules to begin the actual validation. So here's a look at the validation logic, which is performed on all the columns of the broker report. So we're doing this with pandas with either the apply function with some separate logic in another helper module or vectorization. But here we have our valid broker. So the first thing we're going to do is check the data type. If neither of them are strings in this case, we're going to take note of that in our logger, but then we're also going to enforce the string data type and convert both columns to data to the string data type, because before we make our comparison, we want to ensure that they're the same type. So we're going to also do a check there. And then we're going to check if the provided broker is in our broker codes. And then we're going to merge some of the data from the broker codes into our final validation DF, because that's going to be part of the final valid report. So we're just going to look at the email functions here too. Now we're going to use Win32com to launch our Outlook app. And from there, we're going to be able to create a blank email draft. And then we're going to dynamically populate the body and the subject and the recipient of the email. So we're going to go to our CLI args module again. I'm going to see here what happens when we provide a default path. We're going to look in that path for all the invalid broker reports for that day. And then we're going to dynamically generate the body of the email, taking, we're going to create a dictionary for all the invalid rows and the counts of the falses to create the body of this email to summarize the report. And then we're going to pass all the parameters as a dictionary and unpack it into the create email draft function. So that was a Python automation program which validates daily broker reports and then creates email drafts to send the invalid entries to the respective brokers. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any feedback you'd like to share, I'd love to hear it. Thank you very much.